Many of you have heard of the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, with the subtitle, The Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organizing by Marie Kondo. It's not a book of literature or poetry, and in some cases the translation is awkward. Nevertheless, the book did have a lasting impact on my day-to-day life and made me think about my spiritual relationship with my possessions. Along the way, I found the method taught me gratitude, generosity, and expanded my understanding of our seventh principle, which is respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. In a nutshell, the book is a systematic method of decluttering and organizing your belongings by category. Admittedly, this targets the excess of first world countries and the culture of consumerism. The process can take days, weeks, or months, and it involves a lot of decision making. You begin by having a vision of how you would like your house or apartment or living space to feel. You keep those things that bring you joy, or in my case, I expanded the definition of joy to those items that were necessary or useful. My pans don't bring me great joy, but I do like using them every day. In sorting by category instead of location, you avoid shuffling items from one room to another. You then find the right location to store the items you're keeping. You only keep those that brings you joy. And if you want more details on this method, see me during coffee hour. Instead, I'd like to talk to you about the spiritual practices this method fostered and the impact on my life. First, gratitude. Gratitude is not one of our 7 principles, but in a UU World magazine titled The Heart of Our Faith, the Reverend Dr. Gail argues gratitude should be the center of Unitarian Universalist theology. Marie Kondo suggests as you declutter, you thank that object for its use and what it has done for you. Many of us find it difficult to let go of things we've associated memories with, such as a loved one who has passed or something that signifies part of our lives. Stopping and expressing gratitude helped me let go of the items and helped me realize what was part of my past and no longer needed. There are many studies on how gratitude can improve a person's life. In the past, I had taken time to appreciate nature, people in my lives, safe housing, etc., but had not extended that gratitude to everyday objects. The practice of thanking objects helped expand my appreciation in daily life. Second was generosity. Generosity is another spiritual practice this process made me focus on. I thoughtfully tried to identify the best place to donate an item and where it could become useful or appreciated to someone else and not just dumping on someone. For example, when disposing of my daughter's 90s dresses, yes, I did have 30 years worth of clothing up in my attic, I invited several friends who have daughters to come over, and they selected the clothing their children would enjoy. One wanted all of the tie-dye clothing, another wanted all the purple things for their child. Later, I saw in my Buy Nothing group on Facebook that one of the dresses I had given to a friend was now being passed on to yet another little girl. This gave me joy seeing the dress getting used even more. Third, our 7th principle. Our 7th principle, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Marie Kondo comes from a Shinto background in which there is a reverence and respect for everything which is seen as alive and connected to everything else. And in her words, she says, even if we remain unaware of it, our belongings really work hard for us, carrying out their respective roles each day to support our lives. Just as we like to come home and relax after a day's work, our things breathe a sigh of relief when they return to where they belong. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to have no fixed address? Our lives would be very uncertain. It is precisely because we have a home to return to that we can go out to work, to shop, or to interact with others. The same is true for our belongings. It is important for them to have that same reassurance that there is a place for them to return to. You can tell the difference. Possessions that have a place where they belong and to which they are returned each day for a rest are more vibrant. Marie Kondo's concept was I now was viewing inanimate objects as being sentient and connected to me, expanded that definition of me for the interconnectedness of life and gave me something to think about. I am now more thoughtful when making purchases, and I truly think about what I bring into the house, hopefully also lowering my carbon footprint. Having a decluttered house simplifies life on many levels. You can find the items you need so much more quickly. You waste less because you're not buying something because you couldn't find it in the drawer. Maybe that sounds familiar to some of you. It's easy to clean. You and your house will feel lighter. You are surrounded by things you like, and there's also less mental clutter. Marie Kondo concludes, you can put your house in order now, once and forever. The only ones who need to spend their lives thinking about tidying are people like me who find joy in it. As for you, pour your time and passion into what brings you the most joy, your mission in life.
Disturbances in the Field by Lynn Schwartz, my favorite book. Here's a reading from it. A rangy, gray-haired man called Mr. Wilson had built the brown house and rented it out for part of every summer. I regarded him as kind of God or prime mover to have been able to create such a paradise. Squarish, solid, and warm-looking, it might have sprung up as part of the natural landscape, an inevitable design against woods and sky, figure and ground merging. I also marveled that something so large as a house could have been built by one man. But Mr. Wilson had managed it all, walls and floors and windows, long brown beams on the ceilings, front and back porches with stairs of red-brown wood. To get to the beach, we had to climb down an enormous dune, which I believed must be the highest dune in the world. We stood at the top for a moment to contemplate the world below. 3 wide stripes were all the world: blue sky, black ocean, white sand. On the stripe of white sand, little figures like dolls moved about. Evelyn and I glanced at each other and smiled. Soon we would be 4 more dolls on the stripe of white. We raced headlong down the dune, dropping things along the way and climbing back up to collect them. Our parents more sedately took a path that arched sideways down the hill. When I asked how the path first got there, my father said it was made by the feet of people all summer long climbing down the dune, and each summer the path was in a slightly different place. During the fall and winter, when the beach is virtually deserted, he explained, the wind blows the sand around and resettles it over the old path, and sometimes snow covers it up. In spring, when the snow is gone, the path is gone too. Then summer again. People who love the ocean return, and a new pattern is made by their feet. Do you understand? He said. Everything in nature goes in cycles. I have never felt such rightness as I did that summer, when our proclivities and declivities complemented each other as neatly as the broken halves of a bowl. I would like to go back to that time, not to the brown house itself, but to the condition, which, though it partook so thoroughly of the natural cycles, seemed utterly static and safe, a condition of harmony, vastly inclusive, yet lived against 3 broad, clear stripes, a condition of being intact and guarded by a wise and providential power. I can still see the brown house and those 21 days like one long sandy day, and hear my father explaining about the paths and the cycles. I suppose new paths are still being made every summer by the feet of people climbing up and down. I suppose nature is a cycle to which we contribute our lives and deaths, and should do so willingly. But sometimes I just don't want to be a part of it at all. Everything had the chance to be so beautiful, and look what has happened. That was one of the opening chapters of this book, and I first read it in my mid-20s when I was just coming into adulthood. And, you know, I didn't know what to expect from life, obviously. Nobody does, but I still don't. But, you know, that transition into adulthood is particularly daunting. And this book just made adult life seem like a grand adventure. It was full of just wonderful descriptions. I had lived things like this. You know, we had a summer cottage that we went to, and this just described that so perfectly. It had a rich vocabulary. I just spent the time reading, you know, with the dictionary next to me back in the days when you had to use a dictionary to look things up. And I have all these notes in the margin of definitions of things that I didn't know. And here's an example. And it's from the same section. This whole book is not about staying in this brown house. That's just one little tiny piece of it. But I don't know why it was so perfect. Some magic in the brown house itself, where we stayed, maybe, or some special concatenation of weather and internal chemistries. So I was like, concatenation, ooh, that sounds cool. And I looked it up, and here's the definition written in the margin: a series of interconnected things or events. So, you know, it didn't really change my life in any outwardly visible way, but it just gave me a sense of hope. You know, life was going to be full and interesting. It could be. There was room for creativity. The main character is a pianist, and she's in a small ensemble that performs, and she meets with them to practice, and there are all these, you know, times of her walking to practice and just describing things as she goes. And it also just made me a book lover, and, you know, made me really value just the power of story. And it had philosophy, humor, tragedy, creativity. And I just learned from reading it that, you know, it's possible to get through anything, even though it might seem unimaginably difficult. And just that there was a lot to look forward to. And I hope I can still, you know, maintain that outlook in life. And as an aside, the main character's name is Lydia, and that's who we named our daughter after. So this is a very special book for me. Thank you.
Okay, this will be a change of pace. So I'll just do the reading with a little preface. The premise of this, Letters from the Earth by Mark Twain, is that a few thousand years after the creation, God cast Satan out of heaven for being disrespectful toward him. And Satan, while he's away, decides to pay a visit to the earth to observe how God's little experiment is going on. And he writes letters back to his friends, the archangels Gabriel and Michael. And so he begins this way. This is a strange place, an extraordinary place, and interesting. There's nothing resembling it at home. The people are all insane. The other animals are all insane. The earth is insane. Nature itself is insane. Man is a marvelous curiosity. When he's at his very, very best, he's a sort of low-grade nickel-plated angel. At his worst, he's unspeakable, unimaginable. And first and last and all the time, he is a sarcasm. Yet he blandly and in all sincerity calls himself the noblest work of God. This is the truth I'm telling you. And this is not a new idea with him. He's talked about it through all the ages and believed it and found nobody among all his race to laugh at it. Moreover, if I may put another strain upon you, he thinks he's the Creator's pet. He believes the Creator is proud of him. He even believes the Creator loves him, has a passion for him, sits up nights to admire him, yes, and watch over him and keep him out of trouble. He prays to him and thinks he listens. Isn't that a quaint idea? Fills his prayers with crude and bald and florid flatteries of him, and thinks he sits and purrs over these extravagancies and enjoys them. He prays for help and favor and protection every day, and does it with hopefulness and confidence too, although no prayer of his has ever been answered. The daily affront, the daily defeat do not discourage him. He goes on praying just the same. There's something almost fine about this perseverance. I must put one more strain upon you. He thinks he's going to heaven. He has salaried teachers who tell him that. They also tell him there's a hell of everlasting fire, and that he will go to it if he doesn't keep the commandments. What are commandments? They are a curiosity. I will tell you about them by and by. Anyway, I'll pause that reading. So this book was published posthumously, not until 1962, I think more than 50 years after Twain died. His estate, in particular one of his daughters, or his daughter, was afraid that the sacrilege and blasphemy that this book contains would cast Twain in a bad light, although I think it casts him, exactly the way he was, particularly at a very difficult point in his life. Today, I think the critiques of religion would not be so scandalous. They are not all that different from what you would hear in a George Carlin or Ricky Gervais stand-up set. But today, I think the greater concern is the offense he gives to the entire human race and every racial, ethnic, and gender group in it. And I have to confess that rereading this book after several decades was really pretty shocking for me, and so I cannot recommend it. So I think it's not a great book, although it does have some great moments. In some ways, it's an awful book. But I chose it because it had an effect on my life. I picked up this book when I was 17. I had been in an evangelical phase of my life in high school for 2 or 3 years, but I was beginning to question it. And to be honest, when I picked up this book, I was a little afraid of reading it. I was afraid of what it might do to me. But Twain's merciless skewering of everything pompous and illogical in American Christianity drew me in. For example, he argued that Christians' idea of heaven contains each and every imaginable thing that is repulsive to a man, such as 12 hours a day of church filled with mindless singing and harp playing, when he noticed that you never see elderly people taking harp lessons. And heaven contained not a single thing that he likes, in particular, no sex. He also observes that when Adam and Eve made an innocent mistake, and he says it's innocent because, they didn't have a knowledge of good and evil until after they ate the apple from the tree, then God cruelly punished them with eventual death. And not only punished them, but all of their descendants as well. He also says that because God is all-knowing and all-powerful, which Christians celebrate, he's responsible for everything that happens. And then I quote, having thus made the Creator responsible for all those pains and diseases and miseries that I have enumerated, the gifted Christian blandly calls him our Father. It is, as I tell you, he equips the Creator with every trait that goes into the making of a fiend, and then arrives at the conclusion that a fiend and a father are the same thing. What do you think of the human mind? I mean, in case you think there is a human mind. In one of the most scathing chapters, he simply quotes long passages from the Old Testament in which God demands that his chosen people carry out vile war crimes and genocide against the Midianites. And then, when the warriors return from battle, Moses berates them for leaving the women alive. And this was after the commandment, thou shalt not kill. So Twain says God is not capable of observing his own commandments. And it goes on in this book. Like I said, it's offensive in many ways, and Twain often is unfair or over the top, but it affected me. His sharp satire and wit gave me permission to question the dominant Christian culture that I grew up in East Tennessee, and to become a more open-minded, critical thinker. And I'm grateful for that. It's one of the reasons that I'm here today. Is somebody going to do the offertory, or should I read that? Lynn, you should stop the recording. Okay, offertory. I'm not seeing